Turning. Right, welcome to Live at Lunch and focusing on deep work. And we've got, if you've got your phone ready and if you're watching the recording, you might even try it to see if you can engage in the poll. That'll be interesting to see what results we have come through. So let's just moving my screen. So yeah, we're focusing on deep work, and originally I came across this a blog post that spoke about the deep work. And at the time, it was over Christmas time, and I realised through my studies that I wasn't really focusing well if it wasn't what I if it wasn't interruptions, like, so we have emails, we have Facebook, we have a whole lot of, different social media or phone calls and things like that, those sort of interruptions. But what I was finding, even if I turned all that off, I still wasn't really focused. My brain was working in a mode of distraction. And it was really starting to, well, it was frustrating me in what I was trying to do. So I ordered this book and a few others over the time, and at Christmas time is a great time. You tend to be switch off from most things, and it's a bit of quiet time. And I found that, yeah, it really worked for me. So I was wanting to share this. So the idea of deep work, and it's actually a term coined by Cal Newport, who was the author of that book, and he he only released that in 2016. So that the idea and the term of deep work is only a recent, well, phenomenon. It doesn't mean that it's not hasn't been used over time, but the idea and the terminology is something that he came up with. And it was he had a blog that he was using, and he was doing that, and then he wrote the book. So the definition of it is it's professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive capabilities to their limit. So he's really looking at really deep work that is really making a difference. And it can be in all sorts of forms, that deep work. So what he's saying is that it's valuable, that it's actually rare in our society. Distraction, open offices, flipping from one thing to another is the norm. So if we can actually develop that skill, we'll actually be a rare commodity. And the deep work is really meaningful. And yeah, so those things are really can give us, make us really a rare commodity. So there were four. The book actually comes in two parts, so I might sort of stretch into that. So the idea behind deep work is that he shines a lot on the current world of distractions, email, social media, working in offices with open space, which many of us do, and he calls what's called shallow work, where you lose the ability to concentrate and focus. And he shares research by others and gives really examples of high business managers and people who change the world with big ideas, research, even comedy writers, and his own personal self-reflection. So that's what he shares in his book. And he looks at different ways people have applied a variety of deep work. And then he comes comes up with these four rules. And it doesn't matter what field we work in, how being able to focus deeply is valuable to ourselves and the world, how being able to do deep work is rare and thus valuable, and then it's meaningful because then new ideas are developed for our whole world. In part two, he looks at these four deep rules and gives us practical ways. So I'm going to sort of delve into each of those four rules and touch into them. And whilst he goes into greater detail with examples, I'm just going to give you an overview of these rules. So, rule number one is to work deeply. And he talks about you deciding on your depth philosophy. So which way do you want to work? So the four types that he works on. And of course, you can adapt them to how it's going to work for you. So monastic, it's a bit like what, you can imagine being in a monastery. It's where you hide yourself away and disconnect pretty much completely from the distracted world. And he gives examples of researchers and book writers who don't even have an email address, let alone any social media. And so it can be like writers who lock themselves away to immerse themselves in the characters of the book. So that's an example there. So when you really lock yourself away, pretty impractical for many of us, and particularly those people with family. If you could lock yourself away for a while. So there's different options. So the second one is bimodal, and that's where people do a bit of a mix. So that monastic deep work, say blocks of lengths of time. It could be a month or a week at a time when you go on a working holiday, for example, and there's all sorts of variations. And it could be to go to a different location. So some people might actually go to, well, if you're really lucky, you might go to the somewhere overseas, or on a nice place that's out of the way, and or just not connect to emails and sign on the door. So you might actually have a place where you can go and you don't connect, and you're just working inside. So they gave examples of people at university who actually had a sign up saying they weren't there, when in fact they were. So that's a possibility for bimodal. So it could be they're doing a research project and they don't want to have interruptions at that time. The rhythmic philosophy, and that's one that I've chosen, and it's really worked for me. It's where a regular routine of engagement in deep work is established. And Cal shares examples of the comedian Jerry Seinfeld, who write comedic lines every day and marked it on his calendar. And he used a red cross on his calendar. And so by doing that, each day he actually made a chain, and he felt like he couldn't break the chain. So each day, no matter what, he set aside time to write funny lines that would go in his comedy sketches and stuff like that. So he had this practical practice of being rhythmic in his time of focus. So and that's actually what I'm attempting to do. So for me, I've chosen to work, and it doesn't happen every day, but most days, from 9 till 11 in the morning. And I need to be connected with my work. It can vary as to what I'm actually doing, but I try to focus on from 9 till 11. And so I've been doing this a fair amount. I think this thing certainly needs practice, and you can get out of practice and routine. And certainly when I went away on the road, it didn't work for me for that time. I couldn't really manage it, and I got out of whack. But you step back into it, and I found that over time it really changed the way my brain was working, and I could focus, so I could fall into it. And in fact, one of the challenges I found was actually coming out of that deep work. I wanted to keep going because I was so enjoying focusing on that one project, whatever it was, and it varied from day to day. And I could even be on the internet, but I'd have, if I needed the internet for my work, and I would turn off, Facebook, and those sorts of things, or just be on my computer but off the internet and off the phone. The journalistic one is an interesting one, and the strategy actually comes from journalists because the very nature of their work. So if you imagine a foreign correspondent having to be at live events and situations, so you could be in a war zone, and there's lots of unfolding and unexpected times that they have to report. So they may be fully engaged in a distracted world and then burrow down to focus to write and produce their reports. Often really deeply insightful. So this is where someone can just switch off for half an hour and step straight into deep focus work and then come back out of it. So that's really probably one of the most trickiest ones. But if you're into that, that's the way, you sort of develop that skill. So you choose which way you want to do, and you might even do a bit of a mix. But that's one of the rules, is to actually work deeply. One of the things to continue on with this rule is ritualising it, where you'll work, and those questions that we've got on the screen. So with all deep work, it requires practice to see an improvement. So it's a bit like a marathon runner. You can't achieve deep work straight away. So when you start off, if you're being distracted, your brain's thinking, oh, and thinking another thing, oh, I must do that, and, you go off from what you were focusing on. So it needs practice. And I've noticed that if I get out of that mode, I've reduced my deep work. So it's really a matter, it's a bit like, being at a gym or a runner, whatever. It's a physical practice that you need to do. So these are some of the things that he suggests. Keep it at the same place so that you aren't distracted by your surroundings, and you create a space that works well for your concentration. Though with practice, I found I can now deep work in different places. So, but if you're starting off, keep it in the same place. And then I found, and then for how long do you do it? Establish your time of when and how long. And there's apparently a limit to our concentration span. And he goes in the book into detail of the breaks you can have that aren't going to lead you down the distracted path. So, for example, if you're doing deep work and you need a break, not a good idea to check your emails, because that'll send you off in a little whirligig spin. But it might be that you have a walk in the garden, or you put the kettle on and go back and grab a cuppa and go back to your work. So, probably, well, yeah. So he's saying there's a limit of about an hour and a half or 2 hours, but have that break. So, and it's sort of a discrete challenge, if you, to keep it, open-ended if you want to. But I've gone for 2 hours, as I said earlier. And the other thing to consider is how you'll work. Will you be offline? And as I mentioned, I chose to be working on the computer but offline, so not connected to the internet with my phone on aeroplane mode. And if I needed internet research when I was doing that, I'd flag it. So when I was doing my research, might flag something red, so that when I came off my deep work, I could then do my research and bring it and find the information. So Google on, because as soon as you turn on that internet, up come the pop-ups from various programs. And then the fourth tip in terms of ritualising is, how will you support your work? So you might need to experiment with this, but developing a ritual to get you in the zone. So, for example, when I was at home, I'd go for a run or a walk, have breakfast, meditate, grab a cuppa, and then I'd get into it. So now that I'm in the situation where I've got an office in town, I actually try and do that right at the start, and grab a cuppa and then settle down, because I've done my walk and that before I got to town. So and just resources for whatever it is that you're planning. And he actually suggests that you have a plan the night before you finish, or the afternoon before you finish work, so that you know what you're going to step into, particularly if you're changing what you're doing. All right, that's rule number 1. This is rule number 2, is to embrace boredom. Now, that's a really tricky one. So he suggests that you don't check your phone when you're waiting at the doctor's or when you're in a line. And, I've always seen this as being efficient. Get on to while you're waiting there. Don't waste your time just sitting. Look at things, do things, post things, send some messages, check what who's texting or sending you emails. But he's actually saying do the opposite, to actually embrace boredom. And because this is an addictive thing to be checking your messages. So if we're forever being stimulated, we actually serve our addiction to stimulus and distraction. So by letting our brains be quiet and still, we actually can develop our own creativity and be okay with those moments when we get stuck. So when we're actually doing research or in our time of focus, sometimes we do get stuck, and that's okay. Just sit with that. So this is a bit that takes practice. And so he's actually saying break away from distraction, and that will actually help us. And so when it's things like emails, so you might actually lock away times when you actually focus on your emails. And it's such a different thing, isn't it? When we're at work, we often are focused on, well, it's sort of expected that we're checking our emails pretty well constantly. But in fact, what's better and more efficient is to actually focus on our work and then have a set time when we actually check our emails so that we get into a different mode. Rule 3. What a tricky one. Quit social media. Well, this is something I can't do. It's part of connecting with community and growing my business. So frankly, I like connecting with friends and various networks and groups I'm a part of. They serve a function and they're a positive aspect of my life. But I said, what I've changed is working on blocks of social media, and I have to keep. This is one I really need to practice because it is easy to fall into the distraction mode with social media. So really helpful is not to open up Facebook until after I've done my deep work. So you could work out a strategy that would work for you. And the trap is when I post marketing on Facebook, I want to see what's happening, who's responding. So I have to work out set times. So I must admit I'm out of practice for that one because of that lure of social media. Okay, so we're going to try a poll, and this will be interesting to see how we go. And I'm going to see, this is the first time I've ever put it up on the screen, and it should change automatically. So this is awesome. This is from a free tool called, well, you can buy it, but I'm actually using a free aspect of it. So it's poll everywhere. So what you have to do is open up your phone, if we're going to try this, and we're going to, so open up your text message and do a new text, and you want to go to the number 61 427 541 357. Now you might be able to do 0427. I'm doing exactly what's on the screen. And then what you need to do is to text Vivian Evans 000 in. So that's what you got to send in your message. And I think we'll need to keep it just as it says on the screen. So all in caps lock. And then you send the text. And then once you've done that, you get a message back. So I'm doing this on my phone. And okay, so that's being there. Now, once you've done that, so I've got a message back. So I've got to now answer the question up the top of the screen. What is the single thing that interrupts your workflow or concentration the most? So I'm going to write that word and then send it. Okay, so that's got one. So see if you can do that. We're going to see them on the screen as we go. You can have the same or different. And we can see, yeah, as different people are putting in responses. You can put in more than one response and it brings them together. Okay, so there's a few different ones. All right. Okay, so we're getting a few there. Right, so let's move to the next slide. And that was interesting how that worked. Now, again, we've got a different question, and we've already texted to this group, so the number will be right once you've done it. Now, considering social media tools such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, etc., which best links in with how often do you connect into these tools? So is it pretty much all the time I'm awake? Send A. Every few hours, B. A few times a day, C. Around once a day, you'd type in D, and a few times a week or rarely, E. And if you don't use social media, you put in F. Okay, cool. So we've got some results there. And I'm thinking this will still keep working even for people watching I'll try and set it up so it continues. So down the track we can actually see the results and I'll share them. Okay. So let's keep moving on because I know live at lunch we've got our short session. Rule number 4, drain the shallows. So this one's an interesting one and it takes a bit of work to work on that. So deep work is when you're focused and you're really getting into whatever it is. Shallow is when we flip-flop around. So, I think a biggie is emails. But so what he suggests is tasks that can be done with multitasking that potentially don't need deep thought. So that's activities such as emails, scheduling meetings, responding quickly to requests, phone calls. So that's shallow work. So in a connected world, these activities are important and you can't always be avoided, but you can weigh them up as to how important they are. So scheduling time to focus on them around your deep work. So you're mostly doing the deep work, the business work that you're trying to do. It could be that you're planning something, a project, or it could be that you're doing something, it could be study, something you're doing at work, it's a project. So do the shallow work in scheduled times and your deep work in the bigger times, not constantly doing the shallows, those always answering the emails. So in applying strategies to reduce the to and fro. So for example, if you're in the flow of doing some emails and you're trying to plan a meeting, and I found this really useful. So you might say, let's do a meeting. How would you like to do a meeting? And you send an email, they go, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's have a meeting. And then you say, well, when would you like it? Well, I don't care. I can do this. And you go backwards and forwards. So you have about an 8 emails back to and fro. So instead of an open-ended meeting, what you could do is say, right, would you like a meeting next week? I'm free this time or that time. And, just give 2 or more, options. And then that way, the person says, yes, I'm available. I can do, Thursday, one of the suggested times. Or they might say, well, I can't do any of those times and suggest some other times or, when they're free. I've even screenshotted my week and said, so I've got a calendar, a Google calendar, and I've said, pick a time of when I'm free. Now, if you do that to a few people, it gets tricky because they might choose the same time. But that's an option, and that's been really quick in terms of, great, made a decision on the timing with a group of people really quickly. So there are more strategies for that, but you get the idea. So it's about trying to minimise your engagement in time with the shallow work, those things that are backwards and forwards, as well as ways that you can communicate and make things quicker and easier for you to work. More resources, because we're almost coming to the end of our half hour. So I have actually have a blog with a post with even more resources that you could do. So let me see, if I click on that, it'll come up. and hopefully on your screen. So I have got, registering for this workshop, but there's a whole lot of resources there in the blog. I've detailed more notes about that, so you've got some access there. And the other thing that would be great is if you actually registered. I'm actually looking at doing a course, an automated course, or a focus group, actually working on and thinking about going for about a month on deep work and really trying to hone in on those aspects. I am doing it with a group that I'm involved with, so I'm looking at trying to adapt that to anyone who's interested. So if you are, I haven't got the details as yet because I need to work on that, but if you are interested, you can register on this page and just subscribe. I've actually put phone number and email so I can text if you like. So I'll pop that in there. Yeah. Okay. So there's a link if you'd like. Now, so then the next upcoming next week for Live at Lunch, I have Cheyenne O'Brien. He's from the Warrumbungle Shire. She's a road safety officer. And Bike Week's coming up now. It's about the 17th that Bike Week kicks off. So we're going to share some fantastic stuff. There's been a collaboration with Girl Guides in Coonabarabran. We've vamped up our QR code challenge and we will have banners 14 places around town with lots of different activities, and we've set it up so that they can change over time. So we're going to share what's happening with what the Girl Guides are doing, but also the other Bike Week activities. And for those that aren't in the Warrumbungle Shire, we're going to be sharing the other Bike Week activities. So it's about really getting active, which is fantastic for our deep work. If our brain's stimulated and our body by activity, it actually stimulates and gets us working. I haven't worked out the week after, so I'm confirming that with guest speakers. And having a break on the 21st. I haven't put the dates there. I've missed them. Okay, so the 14th to be confirmed, 21st will be actually no webinar on that date. And then I'm really excited. I'm working in partnership with Wendy Jumresk on a course that's Thriving Through Menopause. So she's going to give us an introduction to that and the resources and the information and her knowledge is quite amazing. So she's going to be talking with us and going live on the 28th of September. So we've got some exciting things coming up. So, look, we might do this stretch exercise. We have got 2 minutes. Good to do a bit of a stretch while at work or wherever you are. So place your palms together. I've got some whole new resources I need to add to mine. So I'm gathering some lovely different stretches. So place the palms of your hand together in a prayer position, just like that little image. Move your hands down. Don't do it if it hurts, so only go to your limit. This is really good for your wrists. We tend to forget about those. It actually gets you sitting up straight as well. And hold for about 10 seconds. We're probably there now. Lift your arms up, shake your hands about. Do this at any time at your desk. So we'll go again and bring it down to waist height and shaking it up. And then one more time. Fantastic. So let it go, stretch those out. And thank you so much for joining me live at lunch this Thursday. Wishing you a brilliant week. And we have, as I said, lots of resources for you for helping you with deep work. It'll really make you valuable to your business, to where you're employed, and just for your life. So have fun with that. Thank you so much and see you next time for Live at Lunch.